in a village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, where chimney smoke curled into the morning sky and the sound of the blacksmith's hammer rang out like a morning bell, there lived a family with 3 sons. The eldest son was named Marcus, tall and strong with broad shoulders and a confident stride. He had dark hair that he kept neatly combed, fine clothes that he took great care to keep clean, and a mirror that he consulted often to make sure he looked his best. The middle son was named Philip, clever and quick-witted with sharp eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. He carried a leather pouch at his belt that jingled with coins, and he kept a small notebook where he recorded every penny he spent and every favor he was owed. The youngest son was named Simon, and he was different from his brothers in almost every way. Simon was small for his age, with a mop of unruly sandy hair that never seemed to stay in place, no matter how many times he tried to smooth it down. His clothes were simple and often had patches on the knees from where he'd knelt to help a neighbor in their garden or crawled under a fence to rescue a trapped rabbit. He had warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which was often, and hands that were always busy helping someone with something. The village children loved Simon because he would stop whatever he was doing to push them on the swing or help them find a lost toy. The elderly villagers loved him because he would carry their heavy market baskets or chop wood for their fires without being asked. Even the animals seemed to love Simon. Birds would land on his shoulder, stray cats would wind around his ankles, and the grumpy old donkey at the mill would bray with what sounded suspiciously like joy whenever Simon came near. Unfortunately, Simon's own family didn't appreciate his kind heart the way the rest of the village did. His father, a stern man who valued strength and cleverness above all else, would shake his head and mutter, "That boy will never amount to anything, always giving away what little he has and helping people who can't do anything for him in return." His mother, worn down by years of hard work and worry, would sigh and say, if only Simon were more practical, more like his brothers. And his brothers? Marcus would roll his eyes whenever he saw Simon helping someone, muttering about wasted time and foolish charity. Philip would calculate the cost of Simon's kindness, the bread Simon gave to a hungry child, the coat Simon donated to someone who was cold, and would shake his head at such poor financial decisions. But Simon didn't let their criticism change who he was. He continued being kind because being kind made him happy. He continued helping others because seeing their grateful smiles filled his heart with warmth. He continued sharing what little he had because, as he once told a friend, "What good is having something if you can't share it with someone who needs it more?" One crisp autumn morning, when the leaves had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the air had that special quality that made everything seem sharper and more alive, Simon's father announced at breakfast, "Boys, we need firewood for the winter. The forest is full of good timber, and I want each of you to go and gather what you can. We'll see who brings back the most valuable load." He looked pointedly at Marcus and Philip as he said this, barely glancing at Simon, clearly expecting little from his youngest son. Marcus, always eager to prove himself the strongest, stood up immediately. "I'll go first," he declared, flexing his impressive muscles. "I'll bring back enough wood to keep us warm all winter, and then some." His mother packed him a fine lunch, thick slices of roast beef between fresh bread, a wedge of sharp cheese, a meat pie still warm from the oven, and a flask of the good cider they usually saved for special occasions. Marcus slung his axe over his shoulder, took the generous basket of food, and set off into the forest with his head held high and his stride confident. He hadn't gone far into the woods when he came upon a small clearing where an old man sat on a fallen log. The man was ancient, his face creased with 1,000 wrinkles, his clothes tattered and patched many times over. His white beard was long and tangled, and he looked as though he hadn't had a proper meal in days. When he saw Marcus approaching, his eyes lit up with hope. "Good morning, young man," the old man called out in a voice that cracked with age and thirst. "What a fine, strong fellow you are. I wonder if you might spare a bit of your lunch for an old traveler? I've been walking since dawn and haven't eaten since yesterday. Even a small crust of bread would be most welcome." Marcus stopped and looked at the old man with barely concealed disdain. He glanced down at his basket of fine food, then back at the ragged stranger, and his lip curled slightly. "Spare my lunch? For someone I don't even know? Certainly not. My mother prepared this food specifically for me, to fuel my important work. I'm gathering firewood for my family, which is hard labor, and I need every bite of this meal to keep my strength up. Besides, if I gave you my food, what would I have to eat? You should have planned better and brought your own provisions instead of sitting by the path begging from strangers." With that cold response, Marcus walked right past the old man without a backward glance, leaving him sitting alone in the clearing. Marcus continued into the deeper forest and found a fine stand of oak trees. He chose the largest one, a magnificent tree with thick branches, and began to chop. But something strange happened. On his very first swing, the axe slipped in his hands, and the blade came down on his foot instead of the tree trunk. The pain was immediate and intense, and Marcus let out a yell that startled the birds from the trees. He had to limp all the way back home, his foot throbbing with every step, unable to gather even a single piece of firewood. His fine lunch sat uneaten in his basket because the pain had taken away his appetite entirely. When Marcus arrived home hobbling and empty-handed, his mother fussed over his injury while his father frowned in disappointment. "Well," his father said gruffly, "at least we still have Philip. He's clever enough to succeed where you failed." The next morning, Philip set out with his own axe and his own fine lunch, similar to what Marcus had received, but with the addition of some expensive imported biscuits that his mother had been saving. Philip walked into the forest with his mind already calculating how much the firewood would be worth, how much his father would praise him for succeeding where his older brother had failed, and how this success would cement his position as the favorite son. Just like Marcus before him, Philip came upon the clearing where the old man sat on the fallen log. If anything, the old man looked even more tired and hungry than he had the day before. His hands trembled slightly as he held them out in a gesture of appeal. "Please, young sir," the old man said softly, "might you have even the smallest morsel to share? I'm so very hungry, and you carry such a generous basket. Surely you could spare just a little bit for a poor old traveler." Philip stopped and assessed the situation with his characteristic calculation. He looked at the old man, clearly noting the tattered clothes and empty hands, someone who could offer nothing in return. He looked at his basket of fine food, mentally tallying up the cost of each item. And then he said, in a voice that was polite but cold, "I'm afraid I can't help you, old man. You see, I need all this food for myself. Gathering firewood is hard work, and I'll need my energy. Besides, this food costs quite a bit of money, and it would be foolish of me to simply give it away to someone who has nothing to offer in return. That's just poor economics. If you're hungry, perhaps you should find work instead of sitting by the roadside expecting handouts from hardworking people like me." Philip walked on, dismissing the old man from his thoughts as quickly as he dismissed his plea for help. Like his brother before him, Philip found good trees and began to work. But on his very first swing, the axe flew from his hands in a wild arc and came down on his hand, cutting deep into his palm. Blood welled up immediately, and Philip cried out in pain and shock. He had to wrap his hand in his shirt and stumble back home, unable to carry anything, his expensive lunch untouched in his basket because he felt too sick from the pain to eat. His parents were dismayed to see their second son return injured and empty-handed. His mother tended to his wound while his father paced the room in frustration. Finally, his father turned to Simon, who had been watching quietly from the corner where he sat mending an old woman's torn shawl that he'd offered to fix. "Well," his father said with a heavy sigh and clear skepticism in his voice, "I suppose you'll want to try as well, though I can't imagine you'll succeed where your bigger, stronger, smarter brothers failed." Simon stood up and nodded, not offended by his father's lack of faith. "I'd like to try, father. I may not be as strong as Marcus or as clever as Philip, but I can still do my best to help our family." His mother looked at the meager supplies left in the kitchen. With the good food gone to his brothers, there was little to spare. She scraped together what she could: a small hunk of stale bread, a bit of old cheese that had hardened around the edges, and some water in a chipped cup. It wasn't much, certainly nothing compared to the feasts his brothers had carried, but Simon took the humble meal with a grateful smile and a warm hug for his mother. "Thank you, Mother. This is perfect." As Simon walked into the forest with his simple lunch and his father's oldest, dullest axe, the good tools having been damaged by his brothers, he wasn't thinking about proving himself or earning praise. He was simply enjoying the beautiful autumn morning, listening to the rustle of leaves beneath his feet, and watching squirrels chase each other up and down the tree trunks. When he reached the clearing where the old man sat, Simon's face broke into a warm smile. "Good morning, sir," Simon called out cheerfully. "What a lovely day, isn't it? Though I suppose it's less lovely if you're hungry and tired. You look like you could use a friend." The old man looked up, and there was something different in his eyes now, a kind of knowing twinkle that hadn't been there before, or perhaps had been hidden. "Indeed, young man, I am very hungry and would be most grateful for anything you could spare." Simon immediately sat down beside the old man on the log and opened his small bundle. "I'm afraid I don't have much," he said apologetically, looking at the stale bread and hard cheese. "My brothers got the good food, and they were right to. They're bigger and need more energy for their work. But what I have, I'm happy to share with you. Honestly, everything tastes better when you eat with a friend, don't you think?" And with that simple philosophy, Simon broke the bread in half and gave the old man the larger piece. He split the cheese evenly and poured half his water into the old man's cupped hands, since there was only one cup. They sat together in the dappled sunlight that filtered through the autumn leaves, and Simon told the old man funny stories about the village and asked him questions about his travels. The stale bread and hard cheese somehow tasted delicious, and the old man's face, which had looked so tired and sad, began to glow with happiness and something else, something almost magical. When they had finished eating, the old man stood up, and Simon noticed that he didn't seem quite as old or quite as frail as he had appeared at first. There was a strength in his bearing now, and a light in his eyes that was definitely not ordinary. "Simon," the old man said, and Simon was startled to realize he'd never mentioned his name, "you have shown me true kindness, the kind that comes from a genuinely good heart. You didn't help me because you expected something in return. You didn't even help me out of duty or obligation. You helped me because making others happy makes you happy. That is a rare and precious gift." The old man gestured toward a path Simon had never noticed before, one that led deeper into the forest where the trees grew thick and ancient. "Follow this path," the old man said, "and you will find an old oak tree that has fallen across a stream. Beneath its roots, you will find something special. It is yours because you have earned it, not through strength or cleverness, but through the kindness of your heart." Before Simon could ask any questions, the old man seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, and then he was gone, vanished like morning mist, leaving Simon alone in the clearing wondering if he'd imagined the whole encounter. But the path was still there, clear and real, so Simon decided to follow it and see where it led. The path wound deeper into the forest than Simon had ever ventured before. The trees here were massive and ancient, their branches forming a cathedral-like canopy overhead. Sunlight filtered through in golden beams, and the air smelled of earth and growing things and magic. Finally, Simon came to the stream the old man had mentioned, and there, just as promised, was an enormous oak tree that had fallen across the water, its roots exposed and reaching toward the sky. Simon approached carefully and looked beneath the roots. There, nestled in the earth and gleaming even in the shadows, was a goose. But this was no ordinary goose. Its feathers were pure gold, shining and shimmering as though they were made of actual precious metal. The goose looked up at Simon with intelligent, friendly eyes and made a soft honking sound that seemed almost like a greeting. "Hello there," Simon said softly, kneeling down. "Aren't you the most beautiful thing I've ever seen?" He reached out slowly, and the goose walked right into his arms, settling there as comfortably as if it had known Simon all its life. The moment Simon's hands touched the golden feathers, he felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling of joy and rightness that told him this was meant to be. Simon decided to take the golden goose home to show his family, thinking that perhaps this magical creature could help them in some way, though he wasn't quite sure how. As he walked back through the forest with the goose in his arms, something extraordinary began to happen. The goose's golden feathers began to glow with an even brighter light, and Simon noticed that wherever the light touched, on the trees, on the ground, on the rocks, small beautiful things began to appear. Wildflowers bloomed out of season, their colors more vibrant than any he'd seen before. A spring of clear, sweet water bubbled up from the ground where none had been before. A tree that had been struck by lightning and appeared dead suddenly sprouted fresh green leaves. But the most remarkable thing happened when Simon passed through the village on his way home. The first person he encountered was old Mrs. Whitmore, who lived alone in a cottage at the edge of the village and had been sick for weeks. When she saw the golden goose, she smiled for the first time in days, and Simon noticed that her face had more color in it, her eyes more brightness. "Simon, my dear boy," she said, "what a magnificent bird! Might I touch it? I've never seen anything so beautiful." "Of course," Simon said warmly, moving closer so she could reach the goose. The moment Mrs. Whitmore's hand touched the golden feathers, something amazing happened. She gasped as a wave of warmth and healing seemed to flow through her. The illness that had been weighing her down lifted like a fog clearing, and she stood up straighter, her smile growing wider. "I feel wonderful!" she exclaimed. "It's like magic!" But there was more magic to come. Mrs. Whitmore found that her hand had become stuck to the goose's feathers, held there by some gentle but unbreakable force. She tried to pull away, but couldn't. Instead of being frightened, though, she started to laugh, a sound so full of joy and surprise that it made Simon laugh too. As they stood there, Mr. Patterson, the grumpy baker who was known for never smiling and always complaining, walked by. He saw Mrs. Whitmore stuck to the goose, and instead of helping, reached out to pull her away with an irritated huff. "Silly woman," he muttered, "let me get you free." But the moment his hand touched Mrs. Whitmore's arm, he became stuck as well. His grumpy expression turned to shock, then to confusion, and then, for the first time anyone could remember, to laughter. The magical joy of the golden goose was spreading. Word spread quickly through the village, and soon a whole line of people had formed, each one trying to pull the previous person free, and each one becoming stuck themselves. There was Miss Adelaide, the wealthy woman who never spoke to anyone she considered beneath her station, stuck to Mr. Patterson. There was young Timothy, who was always getting into trouble, stuck to Miss Adelaide. There was the mayor's pompous son, stuck to Timothy. One by one, people from all walks of village life became part of this strange, wonderful chain, all connected to the golden goose that Simon carried. And as they walked through the village in this ridiculous procession, Simon calmly leading the way with the golden goose, followed by a growing line of stuck villagers, something beautiful began to happen. The people who were stuck together began to talk to each other, really talk, often for the first time. Mrs. Whitmore told Mr. Patterson about her late husband, and Mr. Patterson, his heart softened by the goose's magic, actually listened and shared his own story of loss. Miss Adelaide found herself walking beside people she would normally have ignored, and as they talked and laughed at their predicament, she realized they were just as interesting and worthy as the wealthy friends she usually kept company with. The procession wound through the entire village, and everywhere they went, something wonderful happened. Children ran alongside, laughing and clapping. Other villagers came out of their houses to see the spectacle, and they couldn't help but smile and laugh too. The golden goose's magic wasn't just physical, it was spreading joy, breaking down barriers, bringing the community together in a way nothing else had ever done. Finally, the procession arrived at the castle on the hill where the kingdom's princess lived. Now, this princess had been sad for as long as anyone could remember. She never smiled, never laughed, never showed any sign of happiness. The king had tried everything: jesters, magicians, musicians, gifts of every kind, but nothing could make his daughter smile. He had even made a proclamation: whoever could make the princess laugh would receive a great reward. When the guards saw this strange procession approaching, a simple village boy carrying a golden goose followed by a long line of stuck villagers, all of them laughing and stumbling and making quite a spectacle, they didn't know what to do. But the commotion had already attracted the attention of the princess, who came to her window to see what was happening. She looked down at the ridiculous sight: dignified villagers stuck together in a line, trying to walk in coordination and failing, bumping into each other, some hopping on one foot to keep up, the baker's hat falling off, the mayor's son stepping in a puddle and splashing everyone behind him. It was absurd. It was undignified. It was ridiculous. And the princess, despite herself, despite years of sadness that had seemed unbreakable, felt something stirring inside her. It started as a small smile that tugged at the corners of her mouth, then a bigger smile that she tried to suppress. And then, like a dam breaking, laughter poured out of her, real, genuine, joyful laughter that echoed across the castle grounds and through the village below. The king came running at the sound, hardly believing his ears. He reached his daughter's room to find her leaning out the window, laughing so hard there were tears running down her face, pointing at the procession below. "Look, father!" she gasped between peals of laughter. "Have you ever seen anything so wonderfully silly?" The king looked out the window and saw Simon standing there with his golden goose, looking up with his characteristic kind smile, and he understood immediately that something magical had happened. He rushed down to meet them, and as he approached, the magic of the golden goose began to release its hold on the villagers. One by one, they found themselves able to let go, though many of them were reluctant to break the connection that had brought them so much unexpected joy and fellowship. "Young man," the king said to Simon, his voice full of wonder, "you have done what no one else could do. You have made my daughter laugh and brought joy back to her heart. How can I possibly reward you?" Simon looked at the golden goose in his arms, then at the villagers who had been stuck to it, many of them still smiling and talking to each other like old friends, though they had been strangers or even enemies before. He looked at the princess, still giggling at the window, her face transformed by happiness. And then he looked at the king and said something that surprised everyone. "Your Majesty, the golden goose has already given me the greatest reward, the happiness of others. But if you truly want to do something, perhaps you could help my family. My father works hard but struggles to make ends meet, and perhaps you could make sure that the elderly and sick in the village have what they need, so people like Mrs. Whitmore never have to suffer alone." The king was amazed by Simon's selflessness. Here was a young man who could have asked for gold, for a title, for land, for anything he wanted, and instead he asked for help for others. "Your kindness is even greater than I imagined," the king said. "I will do as you ask and more. Your family will never want for anything again. I will establish a fund to help the elderly and sick. And I would like you to come to the castle regularly to visit the princess, for your presence brings joy that we desperately need." And so Simon's life changed, but he remained exactly who he had always been, kind, generous, and more concerned with others' happiness than his own. The golden goose stayed with him, and wherever Simon went, the goose brought magic and joy. Its presence reminded people to be kind, to help each other, to break down the barriers that separated them. The princess did recover her ability to feel joy, and she and Simon became great friends. She learned from him that happiness often comes from the simplest things, from helping others, from genuine connections, from choosing kindness even when it costs you something. Simon learned from her too, that even people who seem to have everything can be desperately unhappy, and that true wealth is measured in love and friendship, not gold and status. As for Simon's family, they were overwhelmed by the change in their fortunes. His father, humbled by how wrong he'd been about his youngest son, apologized for ever doubting him. His mother wept with joy and pride. Even his brothers, Marcus and Philip, came to understand that there were things more valuable than strength and cleverness, that kindness was a power all its own, one that could transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. The village itself changed too. The magical day when everyone had been stuck to the golden goose became a cherished memory, a story told again and again. People who had been brought together that day remained friends. Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Patterson started having tea together every week. Miss Adelaide began volunteering to help the less fortunate. The mayor's son stopped being so pompous and started actually talking to the common folk. Years later, when Simon was grown and the golden goose was still his faithful companion, people would ask him the secret of his success, how a simple boy from a humble family had ended up blessed with magic and honored by the king. And Simon would always give the same answer: "There's no secret. I just tried to be kind. I shared what I had, even when it wasn't much. I helped people because it made me happy to see them happy." The magic didn't come from the goose, not really. The magic was always there, in the simple act of caring for others. The goose just helped everyone see it. And he was right. The golden goose was magical, yes, but the real magic had been inside Simon all along. The magic of a generous heart, the transformative power of kindness, and the simple truth that when you give from a place of genuine care and compassion, the universe has a way of giving back to you in ways you could never imagine. Not because you deserve a reward, but because kindness creates ripples that spread outward, touching lives and changing the world in beautiful, unexpected ways. The golden goose lived a long, long time, bringing joy wherever it went. And Simon lived a good, long life too, surrounded by love and friendship, never forgetting the lesson he had learned that autumn day in the forest, that the greatest treasures are not things you can hold in your hands, but the warmth in your heart when you've made someone else's day a little brighter, a little better, a little more filled with hope and happiness.